So what's happening is when you have the pastors, Pastordowell teaching polygyny and really shoving it down your throat. What he's teaching is basically that one woman is not enough, and what happens is when you have access to unlimited or more than one wife, then that woman or you become a slave, and that's kind of like, and I refer this back to you can't serve two masters. You have to serve one master. And that's kind of like a husband and wife. A husband serves one wife. And there's a beauty in that because what happens is now, because the more access you have, uh, what will end up happening is that woman won't be able to serve you as a husband, as her husband, the way that because the man has unlimited access. So now you've got two people that are going to get screwed up and conflict because the actual intent of God was that a man would get married to one woman and be faithful to one woman. I understand the laws of polygyny, I get it, but the true intention, and let's not forget that the only reason that polygyny or under the polygynous laws in the Bible were there was because if you think from Genesis to the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ, number one, it was number one. The first thing is that in order to be fruitful and multiply the earth in that time, in that dispensation, uh, in order to get the population up, you had to do certain things. So the law had to be provisional for a certain amount of time, and then it also had to be uh, reconciliation in some ways, right? Because you have to reconcile that in order to populate the earth, you have to have certain laws, right? Now, if you go one by one, uh, so that's the first thing, population, in a very different dispensation than we are in today. But mainly, ultimately, from Genesis right to the birth, the death, and the resurrection of Jesus Christ, it was to protect the lineage, the bloodline lineage of Jesus Christ. And once the veil got torn in the temple with Christ, basically what happened was there was no necessity for, or provisional necessity for polygyny. And the other thing is that if you think about it, a man marries woman number one, but then he marries another 10 women. How is that one woman going to be able to satisfy that man when she had 10 other women that she can't compete with? And pretty soon what's going to end up happening is you're going to have bitterness, you're going to have uh, contempt, and again, instead of being having a tender, loving relationship, which sexual union is a very intimate, private, very sacred relationship. And ideally speaking, that one woman, one man is the ultimate form of intimacy because nobody else is able to get in there. Now, of course, I believe that um, the way that sinful nature is, that people make mistakes and they get married and they get divorced and then they come to for a myriad and a variety of reasons. But basically, I believe that there is a second chance and that you can know somebody in the spirit of God under the right intentions. Even if you have a past, the Holy Spirit can cover that and make things new. But like I said, uh, when you have so much access, then the very first wife can't compete with that. Let's be honest. An older woman can't compete with a younger girl, and that's going to cause a lot of problems in the marriage. And it's going to cause strife. It's going to cause a lot of intimacy issues. And generally speaking, as far as the man's perspective, it's unless these men are very, very sexually disciplined, which not too many men are, it's just going to lead to more destruction. And the internal wars are going to be there and there. And we've seen this with Hagar, Sarah, Ishmaelites, the Israelites. It's crazy. So again, and don't forget, there's a trap being set, right? To get you to believe that one woman cannot satisfy you. And so you have to add one more and one more, one more. And that's what happens with pornography. Pornography is, it's a trap that one woman cannot satisfy you. And so you have to have multiple images, multiple things going on. And you just go from one to the next, to the next, to the next. And before you know it, you're so far down the hole or the black hole of sin where lust and greed and ill-gotten gains become part of your life. And before you know it, you're so far down. And it's just like a heroin addict, right? They need more and more and more and more. And it rewires your brain. The more women that you've had multiple sexual encounters with, the DNA rewires the brain of a man and a woman, right? And I understand that men were the seed providers and women are the caretaker to that seed. I get that. But there's a danger in this because, and I don't know too many men that are truly caring about, you know, and again, this goes back to the bloodline of Christ. But when the veil tore in the temple of Christ, it was unnecessary to have polygyny, right? It just wasn't necessary. Now, of course, obviously, the laws have, if you're a man or a woman and your spouse passes away, of course, God is going to open up the provisional doorway for you to get remarried. We all understand that. That's realistically speaking. And of course, there's obviously divorce and remarriage. There's laws and extenuating circumstances for that. But like I said, there's a real danger in this, in our day and age, because it becomes more of a contest to how many women you can get instead of how many you can actually serve. We serve one God, and a real true man, if he is worth anything, with a real true intent, and I'm not talking about the men that are faithful and that don't have lustful desires or that are not sexually disciplined, because the more women if that's all you have in your mind, that means you're an you're an undisciplined sexual man. And God has called us to be sexually disciplined. And I believe that if you are going to get into polygyny, you have to be the most sexually disciplined man on earth. And you have to make sure that you're not just marrying any woman or any women. And there has to be the right intent and desire. Are you just trying to get pleasured? Is that all this is? Or is this truly of the Father? But that is up to you. And I caution women that enter into that relationship. Are you willing to get into something where you're no longer going to be needed? You're no longer going to be loved and desired. Because that man's desire is going to go to another woman. And pretty soon, before you know it, you're going to be a number. You're going to be an object and you're going to be objectified. And once a man gets that thirst and that lust, it's like heroin. He gets more and more and more. And all he's going to do is go from you to the next, to the next. And you might come in number three or number two. But guess what? If there's if that man had a very sincere desire to serve the Father, okay, that's between you and him and God. But most men are not sexually disciplined for a good reason, because they have evil intent. And they may not start evil, but pretty soon, the more women they sleep with, the DNA of that woman is gonna get into that man, right? And the DNA of that man is gonna get into that woman, right? We are sexual beings, and sexual sin is unlike any other sin because it's a soul based, whereas all the other sins are not soul based; they're physical based. Whereas sexual sin is intimacy. That's why it's the most serious sin in the world. So I'll leave that with you, but uh, you got to be sexually disciplined in regardless of whatever you're into. You still have to be disciplined, and very few men are disciplined, and very few women are disciplined. It's just not in our nature, and that's why it's so important to keep the confines of marriage sacred, divine, not licentious, not sinful, not impure, not immoral, and definitely not against the will of the Father, more importantly. Stick to the plumb line. You're going to need it.